Can we stand together and take down the adversaries hiding in the shadows? How do we destroy the deep state? Find out today as I'm joined by special guest Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Raiklin. I'm Drenda, and this is Drenda on Guard. Let's get into it. So, sir, it is an honor to be with you today. And I just want to encourage everybody here. You have put up a fight. You saw what happened in the 2020 elections. You yourself, you've a Green Beret, you've been behind, you've gone and trained special forces. Can you just describe the fight we're in right now and what's going on? Because we want to know the fight so we know how we can help win.
Oh, wow. That's probably the biggest question I've ever been asked. But the fight that we're in right now is a psychological, cultural, spiritual, not fight. I mean, this is kind of a war at this point.
Yes, it is.
And if we had the ability to convey our First Amendment uncensored, this would be a very easy battle and fight to win. Basically, every day it'd be a cakewalk. But because the evil actors in our, we'll call it what it is, deep state, and I have them identified by individual actors, and there's only there's only several dozen key players. But having said that, when they basically violate all norms, principles, constitutional order, and any expectations of what is considered moral, legal, and ethical, then we're at a disadvantage because we try to fight within the bounds of the Constitution and our cultural, moral, and ethical upbringing. So with that, that's why there's a slow process of clawing back our nation back to its principles. And I'm seeing progress, but it's going to take a lot more work collectively for us to get more engaged and involved in order to do what I call is the necessary complete body check against the lawless deep state actors within our federal, what I call the illegitimate and lawless federal executive branch.
Wow. So how long has this been developing? We've seen all kinds of, in every realm. We see it happening to our kids in the medical realm, the educational realm. We see what's happening in the governmental realm. But this, I write and fight like heaven, that this has been planned since the 70s, that they've been working these, the World Economic Forum and the players and raising them up and mentoring them and training them for this hour. And we can see them at the heads of state across the nations, and we see them at tech companies, and we see them in the medical community, and we see them everywhere. They've got players set up, and it would look like a David versus Goliath fight. Just to look at it, it doesn't look good. We see their plans for a new world order, but there's hope, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
Please tell us there is, Ivan.
I always lean in the positive direction because if you contextualize our lot in life, there's always somebody that is in a worse position, either currently in the state of play of the 7+ billion people on the planet, or historically, there's always been somebody that's been in a worse position. So I don't know if anybody in this day and age is going to be in a worse position than some folks that have experienced tyranny in the past. Having said that, you always strive for more and better. So I don't know which direction you want to go with this, but I always, when I do my interviews, I like to start kind of historically and then from the global perspective. And you touched upon it with the World Economic Forum and all the different interests. But using the paradigm that I'm used to, which is in the national security ecosystem, when you're assessing the elements of national power, which is essentially a country's ability to influence the global order, if you will, it's looked at through the prism of 4 components. It's the ability to reach and touch folks diplomatically through the information landscape, military capability, and then the economic sphere. It's also known as the DIME paradigm. So DIME, diplomacy, information, military, and economics. And I've argued that basically after the Chinese Communist Party installed their ambassador in our White House by the name of Joseph Robinette Giden, for him to go ahead and defile and squat in the White House in January, when the illegal certification happened, which would have been in the wee hours of January 7th, 2021, That's when China basically became the leader in at least three of those, in diplomacy, information, and then economics. And then after the mandate was shoved down our nation's throat, that's when 60 to 80,000 critical thinking, patriotic, God fearing military service members said, you know what, we're not going to participate in this lawlessness. And so our military, while it's still, I would say, in the pole position globally, it's definitely been weakened based on what I call the CCP 19 Wuhan lab incident, potentially intentional lab incident.
Right.
And so that had that negative impact on what it did to our national security, our recruiting, et cetera.
Yeah.
Uh, but so in basically three of the four, China has taken the lead role, and they're also working with Russia in order to, what I argue is, to put the United States essentially in third place in the global order amongst the 193 countries. And then China essentially rising to that pole position as the global hegemon. And then Russia is vying to exploit that by training, advising the Chinese on what was working back in the, like you said, the 60s and even 70s during the Soviet time, that the KGB used in order to do what's known as ideological subversion of the West, and particularly the United States, in order to weaken us. So that experience that the Soviets and the KGB and the Soviet Union had is probably being leveraged, that knowledge, and then provided to the Chinese Communist Party to then leverage its own three of the four elements of national power that it has to weaken the United States in conjunction with, China and Russia.
Mm.
And you're seeing that play out, I think, globally. We can go into details if you want, but generally speaking, that's what's going on. And if you want some details on that ideological subversion of what that looks like, there's a KGB defector back in the 70s and 80s that came out publicly and essentially gave a lengthy interview, and you can find it on the internet, that goes into the details of what that looks like. Now, take that model and apply it to today's day and age of, your uh, big tech and big media, all leveraged by the CCP, as well as big companies, big pharma. Well, you can amplify that process instead of it taking a generation or two to be able to subvert an entire uh, culture or a country. It can be done by essentially locking down an entire society, and then over the course of 2 to 3 years, force them to do what we're doing right here, and then manipulate that information so that only curated, manipulated, censored information is being promulgated throughout the nation. When you have at a minimum, a complicit or ideologically aligned FBI, and
Mm.
then subsequently a Department of Homeland Insecurity of individuals that are aligned ideological with that CCP capture at a minimum, and probably more than likely that are actually complicit due to the upstream appointment of these. Let's face it, the current guy sitting in the White House is a Chinese agent. And everybody that is appointed and all policy making that he's done since he was installed has been in order to benefit China, in order for them to reap the return on investment that they provided him and his criminal syndicate family in the tune of $5 to $10 million in bribes on some transactions. And then you also have some of those bribes coming from Ukraine, as well as the mayor of Moscow's wife. And all those transactions are seen from that Biden criminal syndicate laptop.
And we've seen
I've been
these.
saying this for years,
Yes.
and it's only now that your Paul Ryan and Rupert Murdoch, anti-constitutionalists that consider themselves Republicans, that are now starting to talk about it in order to essentially maintain the attention of the conservative lemmings of society, so that they maintain, power and influence going into the 2024 election campaign season, so that they're able to essentially uh, recoup some of that almost $800 million, what I call bribe, to deviant voting systems, what they call as a settlement. Probably in that settlement, the language probably sounds something along the lines of, hey, for the $787 million that we're providing you, deviant voting systems. We need you to go ahead and make the adjudicative outcome of our choosing at a minimum in the primary of 2024. And then obviously we're going to remove some of the folks that are advocating that and showing proof that the 2020 election was illegally conducted and illegally certified.
So what
So I
is
know
our
that's a lot there to
defense?
chew on, but yeah. Oh, what's our defense?
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
I'm just looking at this and you're saying, okay, we're going into the 2024 elections. They're already setting things up. And these chameleons in the media who want to pretend now like they're willing to bring the story forth, about the Biden family when they've tried to suppress it all this time, just to sort of win back some of the trust of the public and
Well,
make it
yeah,
look like they're on. But if they've got this set up again and Dominion's got their machines, are we going to have a repeat of 2020?
I think it's, well, looking at it from my kind of threat, most probable course of action and most dangerous course of action analysis, I'll say this. Let me go into detail of what I think that they're going to do and some of the indicators to support what they're going to do in order to steal the election, in order so that it's anybody but Trump. And it doesn't matter, laws, rules, morals, ethics, be damned, right? In the process, because let's face it, they just were complicit in murdering, depending on what the number you're looking at, it's either from whatever, 30, what was the number? That 38,000 to 3.8 million individuals based on their policies as it relates to the CCP-19 response.
Right, right. And then
So,
what they do in the school systems with our kids, with CRT and with
right,
transgender.
promoting the mutilation of the body, of the
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
And if yeah, it's basically what you just said, just as a tangent. What they're promoting is eugenics, right?
Yes.
So murdering the children in the womb, and should they survive, then you murder the child at birth, like was attempted in Virginia. New York has those laws on the books. California is in the direction of, should they survive those two attempted murders and actually survive a couple of attempted murders in birth, post birth, then it's promulgated to go ahead and mutilate the child. And then now they're pushing for it without parental approval to mutilate the
Yes.
child,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And to get away
I
this,
always I always argue that for those that are promoting this sort of mutilation, I recommend that those advocating for it initiate it with themselves,
yeah,
right? Before advocating it for others. And maybe they should consider mutilating specifically, for example, the neck, right? And
mm,
then from that point, then they won't be in a position. Well, they'll be able to decide for themselves whether or not promoting the mutilation of themselves is going to allow them give them the ability to then advocate it so that others do it and their children does it. I
mm,
argue that they're probably not going to survive that level of mutilation, but let's try it out. I think
yeah,
all of them should consider that.
yeah, yeah. What reaping what they've sown. It's incredible how we've moved so fast, Ivan, into all of these things and acceptance of it across the culture, and how they've silenced people to not
It's
talk
not
about it.
accepted. It's been pushed through algorithmic behavior. So that's where I differ with a lot of people.
I agree with you.
It's the economic might in order to gain attention of the masses on these kind of the platforms that allow for what is it, not single, it's like double duplex, where you're able to interact with the content, right, which is social media. Well, they are trying to create the algorithmic behavior to manipulate society into believing that
Yes.
the 2020 election was not. They're trying to prove to us and convince us that the 2020 election was the most safe and secure election ever in the history of humanity. Never before has the human race experienced such pristine electoral outcomes, right? That's what they want to convey to us. Well, bottom line is it's all algorithmic behavior in order to cover up the previous cover up.
Yeah.
And before I go into that, I want to answer your question of what are they going to do? What they're going to do is Paul Ryan and Rupert Murdoch is going to work with the Speaker of the House of Wisconsin, who's dual-hatted as the National Conference of State Legislatures president, to pass laws in the states at a minimum of Nebraska, New Hampshire. Listen closely: Nebraska, New Hampshire, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, And then after the steal for the Republicans this year in Virginia, you're going to have a Republican trifecta so that that legislature will be coerced and forced into passing laws, all 7 of them, in order to make it impossible to appeal the adjudicative outcome of the machines in those states. So
Swing
that
states.
$800 million bribe given to deviant voting systems is now going to create create an outcome of the primary election, coupled with changes of laws of the GOP committees of each of these states, so that anybody but Trump gets the nomination.
Anybody but Trump.
And
That's what
then
they want, because they're all
there
other
will
ones are
not be
all
a
in their pocket.
mechanism. Right. And there will not be a mechanism to appeal it, because those state legislatures that have plenary authority over their elections, particularly presidential and vice presidential, guess what? There will be no mechanism to appeal it once the laws are changed.
Now,
so then you ask the question, how do we change this?
yes.
How
And
do we stop it?
did the Supreme Court's ruling about California and the ballots not fix this problem, or at least put a caveat in there somehow?
No, it's pretty simple. I mean, the solution to all of this is simple. It's literally waking up the country. Now, it's not simple when you have a complicit and belligerent, illegitimate, lawless executive branch that's stopping you from getting the message out. Let's kind of go into this real quick so that you understand who the enemy is of the solution that we're trying to create.
Yes.
And the solution that I'm advocating is, it's the most peaceful, patriotic, legal, moral, ethical solution where human beings that are lawful voters in our country, our state, our precinct, our district, are allowed to vote should they want to vote. And if they don't want to vote, do not count their vote for somebody and allocate their vote for somebody. That's what I'm advocating for. So who are the people that are stopping this from happening? Well, the coercion, manipulation, and censorship, the same people that illegally spied on the Trump campaign in 2016 are the same exact people that did the censorship industrial complex that was just exposed by the Twitter files. Let me name some names.
Please.
The supervisory intelligence analyst for Crossfire Hurricane, which was the operation to spy on Trump and the people around him, to include General Flynn, George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, and Paul Manafort. The senior intelligence analyst was Brian Auten. Brian Auten was later becomes the Foreign Influence Task Force lead, which is the organization that the FBI headquarters that coordinates the interagency between the DNI and the Homeland Security Department to decide what content is considered foreign influence, meaning misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, right? Wow. Same dude. So think about the biases and what they're trying to do to cover up their previous cover-ups and the illegal nature of their activity in order to maintain their existence. Well, let's add a few more names. What about, who else was involved in this censorship scheme? Well, the number 3 guy at the San Francisco field office, who heads up the counterintelligence arm of that office for the FBI, is a guy by the name of Joseph Pientka III. He's there right now as we're speaking, last I checked. What was he before? He was the initial senior ops guy, known as the supervisory special agent, during the launch of Crossfire Hurricane, the illegal spying on the Trump campaign. Now, why is San Francisco field office important? Let me drop a few other little notes related to San Francisco. Well, guess where the San Francisco field office headquarters, or I should say the office, is located? It's in Nancy Pelosi's congressional district.
I was going to guess. Exactly. I was going to guess Nancy Pelosi.
What else is in San Francisco? Well, how about Twitter? How about, well, the San Francisco Bay Area, right? How about Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and the others? So who at the San Francisco field office, at the behest of Brian Auten at headquarters, DC, is doing the coordinated effort in order to censor people and content that would expose these deep state actors? Lo and behold, we know this because 1, Twitter files, and 2, the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit We got a guy by the name of Elvis Chan that was coordinating all of that. So think Brian Auten at headquarters, DC, basically the top guy over in San Francisco field office, one of the top guys, and his surrogate Elvis Chan are communicating with who at Twitter 1.0? I'll answer that. His name is Jim Baker. Jim Baker, basically the number 2 lawyer at Twitter. What was he before he went to Twitter? Just like Joe Pientka III went from Crossfire Hurricane over to the San Francisco field office, Jim Baker used to be the general counsel at the FBI. Oh, and he was the general counsel, meaning the lawyer that signed off and approved for Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Joe Pientka, Brian Auten, and the rest of the crew. There are more names, but I'm just giving you the top 5, basically, that authorized the spying on the Trump campaign. Oh, I'll be remiss if I don't mention a guy by the name of Bill Priestap. Bill Priestap, head of counterintelligence at the FBI, the guy that wrote notes. Are we going after Flynn to fire him or to get him into a lie? Anyway, all the same people, all the same actors. And then basically every single event that occurred subsequent to that was the cover-up of the previous cover-up. So why was the Mueller investigation launched? It was to cover up the previous illegal spying. Why was the Ukraine whistleblower thing, why did that happen? It was to cover up the previous Mueller investigation. And then the president at the time attempt to prove what now Paul Ryan's faux news and Rupert Murdoch's faux news is showing. Oh, Biden, look at him getting all these bribes. Well, guess what? We already saw and knew all that. And the FBI, the same ones that I just mentioned there, are the same ones that are covering up the information related to CCP Manchurian candidate Joe Biden. Because guess what? If he's not in there, if Trump's in office, he becomes an existential threat to every single person I name. And it doesn't just include them. It also includes those that provided cover in order to make money hand over fist as it relates to the CCP-19 response. And who are the senior policymakers of the CCP-19 response, ma'am? Wasn't there a COVID task force set up in the White House?
Yes.
And wasn't Mike Pence the boss of Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx?
Yes.
And wasn't Jared Kushner the shadow governor of that task force?
Wow.
He was. Wow. They both were. They were the two that decided on who would get what contracts to make as much money as possible as it relates to the ventilators, the face toilets, the remdesivir stuff. Remember all that? So why am I being investigated across 4 agencies in the federal government, across 10 investigations, 11 maybe? It's because I'm investigating every single one of them and exposing them.
Right.
So bring it on.
I
want more people. I want more people. I want more entities within our government to investigate me, because then I immediately get notified when that happens, because I know enough people, having served 25 years in the system. When something happens, guess what? Someone sends me a cryptic message, and I know exactly who, what, when, where, and why, and how is going on. And so we can play we can play law offensive coordinator. I don't know if you can see in the background there. It goes both ways. You investigate me, I investigate you, and I don't back down. I just only escalate. So,
and truth has to come forward. It has to, because I know even with kids as a mom, when they tell a lie to cover a lie to cover a lie, at some point those lies add up, and the cover up is where they actually end up getting exposed. It is discouraging.
But each cover-up is so much more exponentially egregious.
It is. It's bizarre.
They literally, over 1 million people were murdered in the United States in order to cover things up. What do you think that they're gonna go to Stalin, Hitler level, if they haven't really already, level mass murdering schemes in order to protect themselves? Then it begs the question, right? At what point do your viewers and listeners kind of look in their mirror and say, when am I going to decide to stop the mass unfettered murder of my neighbors, my family, and my children from happening? Like, what are you willing to do in order to stop that from occurring? Because it already has.
Right.
And they're only continuing to escalate it.
Exactly.
And I just don't know, what more proof do you need?
Yeah.
Well, I guess you need it. You need to know who censored and manipulated you. And I think as I go out and speak throughout the country, it wakes up even a lot of people on our side, even those that are, let's just call it for what it is. Those people that consider themselves Republicans that succumbed to the emergency use authorized product consumption, whether it's the nose rape devices that in order to provide DNA information to these different companies, whether it be the face toilets in order to for these folks that I mentioned already to make money hand over fist in the billions, and then subsequently whether it was the DNA mutilation injections or the myocarditis makers, the heart exploders. Different people have different names for them, but at the end of the day, all three of those are emergency use authorized products that cannot be mandated. But guess what? Psychologically, they were mandated,
Yes.
and they were mandated by the Brian Aughtons, the Joe Pientkas, the Christopher Rays, the Jim Bakers of the world. All roads lead to the FBI.
Yes, yes, they do. Just the whole thing is like you're in this Orwellian nightmare that you hope you'll wake up from, and you keep hoping for change. You keep hoping there's going to be an answer. I feel like we're in a psyop. I just want to talk to people about, because so many good, well-meaning people will listen to the narratives and they'll forget about what was done, and they want to move on, and they just want life to be peaceful and good. They don't want to ruffle any feathers. They don't want to get anybody upset, so they keep.
Now they ruffled my feathers. Yeah. You know how people say, "Oh, Ivan, you don't want to do that because you're going to get someone mad. You're going to get them." They're on my list, okay? They just placed themselves on my list, and that's how everybody needs to see this. I would love to be the secretary of retribution when we get to a point where we can create massive amounts of appropriate consequences for. I have a list, right?
Yes, I do too. We all are making that list.
I have a list of several thousand people that will be facing consequences, but we have to educate the nation for them to understand that those consequences are appropriate, because the people that are listening in are ultimately going to be part of the jury pool that we're going to need in order to create the necessary consequence. Some of the content that we create is going to be on the desks of judges that also consume content. But the thing is that and this is the answer to this, this is the solution to the problem. The faster we can bankrupt faux news, the faster we can get to retribution, consequence, and so that this will never happen again.
Yes, faux news and the corporations that are driving these agendas.
Rupert Murdoch, Paul Ryan, who sits on the board of faux news.
Yes.
Yep. The faster we can do it, this is how we do it, right? Tucker Carlson needs to host a presidential candidate forum with Trump, Ramaswamy, and RFK Jr., and all of it gets aired out, and 500 million people will watch that series of presidential campaign forums while it's concurrently live streamed on Rumble, Truth, and Twitter.
Yes.
And guess what happens to the previous legacy media? No one consumes it anymore. Yeah. Then they go bankrupt because you're not going to have sponsors.
We're trying to do those things, but it feels like they prop up these things by laundering money and pushing money back toward it, to where it's like they're hanging on by a thread.
Well, you're participating. I mean, you have your own show. I have to thank you for even having me. I mean,
well, thank you for being here. This is the thing we've watched. When Donald Trump first said there was fake news, we all went, yeah, that's probably some fake news. Now we look at it and go, we can't trust anything. It's all some kind of a psychological warfare. They're playing a game with us. Even the Hunter Biden thing, the laptop, and now they just snap it. It's like, it's a traffic ticket, and then that's supposed to make us all feel, justice was served, and things were done. They play games with us when we know things finally finally they have to do something to make us all feel a little bit better. So we go, okay, it's good, there's justice, but we really see there's no justice in what they're doing with him.
Well, let me ask this question. How do you have some viewers from Virginia, I'm sure, and listeners?
Sure.
Well, how about those that are in Virginia contact the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia and say, hey, Jason Miyares, why have you not yet arrested and detained and thrown in solitary confinement the one individual that is a resident of Virginia that has brutalized the Constitution against thousands at a minimum Virginians, destroying their First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, Fifth Amendment due process. And I'm talking about the guy that lives in Prince William County. And oh, by the way, why don't you contact the sheriff of Prince William County to also ask him to work with the Attorney General to arrest this guy? And the guy that I'm referring to, his name is Christopher Wray, W-R-A-Y, who lives in Virginia. And everything, I don't care if he's the director of the FBI, you violate my rights, guess what? We're going to use the necessary mechanisms to violate you. And I say that in a peaceful and patriotic way, lawfully.
I understand. It's the law. We are also frustrated.
Let me finish with this. I volunteer, while you're talking to Jason Miyares and the sheriff of Prince William County, I volunteered to be deputized by the appropriate authority to be the #1 man in that breach to conduct the raid to arrest that gentleman.
Absolutely. So will this happen? If enough people call, enough people fight in their state level and say, hey, these crimes were committed in our state, why aren't you prosecuting? These things were done. Will they actually do anything?
Well, we're exhausting our abilities to do things through the lawful means. So we have to go down the list, right? The federal executive branch won't do it, as evidenced by the CCP captured and totally corrupted Department of Justice. So that is a totally wholeheartedly domestic terrorist organization at this point. So then we have to fall back on the states to designate those organizations as such. So we have a House that can potentially, if they have the political will, but they're also captured at the senior levels where they can defund. I don't like to use the word defund. Basically neutralize this domestic terrorist organization so that no more funds are allocated to the lawless activity that they're involved in. That's one, at the federal level. Two, the state attorneys general need to go ahead and be supported by the populace to get them to do things such as raid, arrest, detain the biggest domestic terrorist organization leader currently in our nation by the name of Chris Wray. He happens to reside in Virginia. So Virginia has that lawful authority to do so. And any other federal executive branch member, actually any other federal government employee and office that resides in a state, meaning Virginia and Maryland are the key ones. But let's just say Virginia, I don't care if you're a federal judge. I don't care if you're a member of Congress. At the end of the day, there needs to be a check on the system. And when you have China first individuals that are wholeheartedly captured and agents of a foreign threat actor, the states need to reclaim their sovereignty authority and then essentially provide the massive body check against those individuals. Once we start seeing that, things will start to kind of get back into some sense of normalcy. And hopefully on Wednesday, by the way, next week, Wednesday, the domestic terrorist, the leader of the biggest domestic terrorist organization in our nation, will be testifying before Congress, the Judiciary Committee, on Wednesday of next week.
Is Congress compromised to the place, though, when they hear these different testimonies? Why can they bring some kind of justice to the system once they expose it? Because we keep hearing and seeing things that I think all of us who know these crimes have been committed, who see the lies, it does do us some, it does do good, I guess, to hear it come out. But then what actions can we demand be taken to stop and to hold these people accountable and to give them justice?
So this is a message for Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan is the chair of the Judiciary Committee, who is going to be hosting this hearing where he brings in America's #1 domestic terrorist leader, Chris Wray. Well, he can call on the U.S. Capitol Police as the chair, also confer with the Speaker of the House so that he brings in the House Sergeant at Arms and conducts an arrest of this domestic terrorist on on the Capitol grounds, in the House office building, in the Rayburn building, by essentially looking over to the U.S. Capitol Police officer and say, "Sir, ma'am, go ahead and arrest this witness," not only for contempt, lying, a 1001 charge, and then they can process him on the Capitol grounds as a legislative branch law enforcement entity, and not release him off the Capitol grounds, and essentially make a makeshift jail cell in the basement. I'll volunteer to be an intern security guard to make sure that this domestic terrorist is complying with the rules of his detention on the Capitol grounds. That would be my recommendation.
So Jim Jordan does that, which probably is not likely, but if he does do that, and he did that, will the Capitol Police that were part of January 6th actually carry out what he tells them to do?
Well, we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
These are, at the end of the day, I will volunteer to be deputized in order to make this happen. Again, through the legal proper process. But here's the problem. When you have, and this raises a great question, because here's what happened on January 6th and why this may not happen on Wednesday. The General Counsel of the United States Capitol Police is a guy by the name of Thomas, Tad is his nickname, DeBiase, Dibise. He is the most senior person at U.S. Capitol Police that has been there before January 6th, on January 6th, after January 6th, and is still there. Similar to the most senior executive branch official within our federal executive branch that remains in office before January 6th, during January 6th, and after January 6th, and still there, a dude by the name of, you got it, Christopher Wray. So what does that mean in the case of General Counsel Tad DeBiase? He was the guy that would have signed off on all of the 1,000+ criminal referrals for the election justice rally attendees that attended the rally and moved their way into the Capitol, as well as those that were on the Capitol grounds, and elevated those charges, and then probably doctored the CCTV footage of the U.S. Capitol Police to only include the inculpatory or incriminating evidence with those criminal referrals before they were sent over to the Department of Justice.
So he's already complicit. So why will he do what they ask him to do?
And so that's on the criminal referral side. And then the U.S. Capitol Police Chief, Thomas Manger, was brought in as the cover-up crew so that the previous acting police chief, Yogananda Pittman, who was the one, I argue, that facilitated the unlawful entry into the Capitol by leaving the Capitol completely unsecure, not providing the intelligence to the, at the time, current Capitol Police Chief, so that he could argue to the Capitol Police Board, which is basically ran by Pelosi and McConnell, to say, hey, we need more additional coverage on January 6th so that the Capitol would be protected. Due to optics, which was code for, no, we're conducting a coup d'etat, so due to optics, we're not going to have any external support to protect the Capitol. We need to have people come in so that America could see, hey, look, threat to democracy, an insurrection, rather than a coup d'etat conducted and headed up by Nancy Pelosi, and you got it, Mike Pence, when they refused to have a quorum on January 6th to certify the illegally conducted and certified election by the states, was also illegally certified by our federal, our legislative body, because there was no quorum, which is required under the 12th Amendment. A lot of issues here, total lawlessness. But yeah. I'm going to physically be present on the Capitol grounds on Wednesday, so that in the event that Jim Jordan does decide to make the bold move and Kevin McCarthy agrees to it, to direct the, remember this, you don't have to have the U.S. Capitol Police Chief, which has the overarching jurisdiction over the Capitol grounds. I argue you can actually have the House Sergeant at Arms and we'll see how this plays out. And if there's a problem with it, then I guess the general counsel will have to make the decision on whether or not that's proper process. And in that process, maybe we can get a little bit more insight on who this guy Tad Tobias is. Mind you, he was the one that created the agreement between the current Capitol Police Chief and the previous one to put her on leave without pay till she reached her retirement age, so that she could collect on retirement with no intention of returning back to the Capitol, so that she would be protected in her new position while awaiting her pension at U.S. Capitol Police, while she was collecting, I don't know, $300,000 a year paycheck over at, guess where? Berkeley, the head of police at UC Berkeley, which I think happens to be Zoe Lofgren's congressional district. And she was the House admin chair before that, which has oversight over the Capitol Police Board. Anyway, you see how all
it's a web of deceit, isn't it?
It's
a complete web of deceit.
After cover up after cover up. And I'm the only guy literally beating my head against the computer screen, basically have connected all those dots. I guess asked the right questions.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, if I go here, I think I may have something to show you. Luckily, certain committees in Congress and members of Congress are actually listening in and are starting to get to the truth. We just had they just had Yogananda Pittman, the former acting police chief, testify, and I would love to see the transcript from that. It was a closed session transcript. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the solution. AG, so the Attorney General of Virginia, the Sheriff of Prince William County, go ahead and arrest Ray. Concurrently, if they don't arrest him by Wednesday, then the House Sergeant at Arms, maybe with a compliant Capitol Police officer, while Ray is testifying, we go ahead and detain him there. And then in addition to that, we also have the Judiciary Committee proposed legislation, or a matter of fact, we basically just have the Freedom Caucus members or the Real Team 6 members, 5 or 6 of them, to tell Kevin McCarthy, guess what, buddy? If you don't completely stop this weaponization of our federal government 100%, then we're just not going to allow you to be the speaker anymore. And actually, we will not allow anyone to be a speaker of the House. And that way, guess what? There will be no federal budget. Zero for everybody. And let's play chicken. That would be another mechanism.
Yeah, well, I guess we were trying that earlier in the year, and they signed on the dotted line. So the frustration level, I know
the political will, the level of compromise in political will is just outrageous.
So when Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp, do you think he knew the swamp was like an ocean? And wasn't just a swamp? Because it sure looks like there's
he had no clue.
Guys that are not connected.
He had no clue. And without any disrespect, he still does not understand. The people that are around him, many people that are around him are still, they're part of the system to make sure that he does not know. I mean, you still have a lot of people that are loyal to Pence that are in the periphery.
I'm learning the hard way because, when I first met Pence, he seemed like a mild-mannered, nice Christian man. Same thing with Pompeo. I was at an event dinner where he's sitting next to me.
I could be wrong on everything I'm saying, but...
No, but I saw what you're saying because someone said, will anyone ever trust the FBI and the CIA again after what happened with Whitmer when we found out there was FBI informants involved? And his response, Pompeo's response was, oh, sure, they will. And then I said, well, what about January 6th? And he goes, that's just conspiracy theory. And at the same time, he told us he was going to run for president. And we were all shocked. We're like, well, what about Donald Trump? Because we're thinking he's with you, Pompeo's with Trump. And then he goes, oh, he can't make up his mind from day to day. And then from there, I see him 2 weeks later at another dinner. He doesn't remember. He just told us at that dinner he's going to run for president. 2 weeks later, he said, could you just pray? My wife and I are trying to decide whether we're going to run and whether that's what God is leading us to do. And I thought, wait a minute, something is very wrong. It's like you're playing a role, and you just see these people that we think they're held up as, oh, he's a Christian, or he's a statesman, a good man, an honest man. And then when you see them and hear them behind, I was actually January 6th, I was in D.C. in Mike Pompeo's office praying for him that day. And later, when I saw him, I said, well, thanks for the alibi for January 6th. And then I said, and by the way, why was it he out with Donald Trump speaking instead of in his office having a group come in to pray? So there's so many things. I'm always trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together myself and pray.
Well,
and you
if
are
I
that
may,
guy that puts the pieces together. But we just all want to know, what can we do? And is there a hope to change this? I know we can pray, but what can we do? We can't go arrest Christopher Wray. We call our AGs. What do we do that we can win? Because we all know God has a strategy to win, but what is it?
So the way that most people move is when think about it this way: pain, shame, embarrassment, right, is a motivator. So then how do we create that? Well, we have to educate ourselves on what is going on around us and let them know that we know.
Yes.
And then once they know that we know, we make sure that every single person in their sphere of influence essentially knows and shuns them.
And they're traitors.
Let's use as an example our beloved Mikey Pence. He's got a family. He has neighbors. He has friends, right? When we collect through our collective networks, I'm sure we've all collectively have crossed paths with those individuals that I mentioned. When we essentially say, hey, these are the questions that I have about Mike Pence. Why is his former chief of staff, Joshua Pitcock, whose wife is Catherine Seaman, who worked at the FBI for Andrew McCabe, why was she involved in the potential 25th Amendment removal of Donald Trump along with Rod Rosenstein? And why was that never really discussed?
Right.
Can you answer that? And did you know that they were conducting the 25th Amendment removal of Trump? And how much did you know? And were you involved in it? And did you actually direct it, Mr. Pence?
And why don't Republicans ask that? Because they're part of it too, right? I mean, we see the Mitch McConnells, the Lindsey Grahams that know how to put on the drama and act like they're so for Trump and so with him at the border and everything. And then they turn just like chameleons. We don't even know in the Republican Party who, it gets clearer and clearer, but who's really the good guys and the bad guys. You know, you can't, for me, I don't have the incredible background you have, but I look at it and go, I can't fight an enemy. I don't know who the enemy is, and I don't know who the good guys and bad guys are. So trying to figure that out, that's a challenge in and of itself. And then the good guys, are they so low in number that even when they fight or they try, they're not able to get done? They keep exposing it, and that at least starts to share with the American people what's going on.
Let me say this. You asked the question, who's the enemy? I think we have to focus on the big picture enemy. So obviously, globally, I think you already mentioned it. So obviously your viewers, listeners are also aware of the World Economic Forum, right? Your Klaus Schwabs of the world.
Right.
But then who's behind that? Because at the end of the day, the
yes,
UN.
That's what I'm trying to always figure out. Who's behind that?
I mean, a lot of people are mentioning their names, right? Your Bill Gateses, the president of China. Gates just met with Xi. I mean, it's all out there publicly to see what's going on, right? And then you have Mike Pence meeting with Zelensky because he wants his 10% for the big guy. Now that the Uniparty has decided to move along from Biden because he played his role. And the way they're trying to, this is what I think is happening. They're trying to make it so that Biden is viewed by so many people as so bad that then the Paul Ryan faux news can say, oh, any Republican can win. And then since we've criminally indicted with our buddy Christopher Wray, who, by the way, Chris Christie and Mike Pence teed him up as the director of the FBI, Chris Wray is doing the bidding of that uniparty so that they can make sure that they gag Trump, effectively set up a mechanism so that he can't run, so that the court of public opinion is like, oh yeah, I see why he lost and then or can't campaign. And so now we have to choose between DeSantis and Pence. They're going to tee up Pence, and then DeSantis is going to be the VP pick. But the way that we counter that is to expose what their plan and play is, force them into defending that is not the case, and essentially say, well, if that's not the case, then move off of the machines. No more machines in our voting system. One day, in person, paper ballot, hand count, voter ID. Once we do that, then we're good. And the way that we do that is we have to essentially flood the National Conference of State Legislatures annual conference in August, mid-August. Go to ncsl.org. We get Mike Lindell maybe and some others to essentially camp out there, be a sponsor to that event, and make sure that we educate those legislators that are attending that event to not be bamboozled by the Robin bosses, which are Paul Ryan lackeys, to go ahead and change laws in these states to keep the machines in place. Instead, we just say, hey, let's go back to how it used to be done. Avoid the algorithms, avoid the FBI, the DHS manipulation of our intellectual psyche, and then just have people go into the booth in person, right? Like I just said, in person, paper ballot, hand count, voter ID, one day.
Yes, as it should be. ncls.org, you said. They can go there and get information about that. That's
the organization that I argue is going to be, again, this is my analysis. If I were the enemy and I was basically trying to cleanse myself of TDS and Orange Man Bad syndrome, then I would use the levers of power that are already in my ecosystem, meaning everything starts in Wisconsin and ends in Wisconsin as it applies to the Republican Party. I talked about this in a event that I spoke at in Brevard County, Florida, a couple weeks back. Bottom line, the Republican Party started in 1854 in Ripon, Wisconsin, and now the power center of the Republican Party remains there because you have Paul Ryan from Wisconsin, Southeast Wisconsin, Racine County. You have Robin Vos, who's the longest standing Speaker of the House in the country, the Speaker of the House of Wisconsin, who's, like I said, dual-hatted as the president of this National Conference of State Legislatures that's going to use his platform to manipulate the system. Paul Ryan's going to use faux news to manipulate it, right? And then number three, you got Ryan Priebus from Wisconsin, former chair of the RNC, who's heading up the RNC convention going into July of next year. He's going to manipulate and shape it out so that how his friends from Wisconsin want it. And then the last one is Brian Stile, who's the chair of the House Administration Committee, who has it's the committee, one of the subcommittees decides on how to create federal laws as it applies to the elections. I'm going to keep an eye on him, and it's probably going to be set up in a way that everybody that I just mentioned is going to use all of their power to make sure that Trump is not able to run. And in the instance that Tucker Carlson and the independent platforms and Joe Rogans of the world and Elon Musk allows for the truth to come out to be able to counter their narrative, should Trump secure the Republican nomination amidst all of this chaos and pandemonium, this is where I think it'll get spicy. Because think about it. They have to protect their previous cover-ups, and there's so many of them. So they're not going to stop at anything to make sure that they stop Trump from securing the presidency. And I refer you back to what the FBI did to the Kennedy brothers and Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, that's always the concern. Even the last time I found myself praying many times about that.
So again, that's your Chris Wray.
Because they have everything to lose. And the average citizen is just wanting peace, just want to keep things smooth. And so they don't want to fight. They don't want to enter in the fight. No. I'm always trying to help people rise up to see the truth, know the truth, to be free, because that's what Jesus paid for, that we would be free. And then when there's not truth, when you suppress truth, then that's when you can take people's freedoms. And that's what this is all about. At the end of the day, they want a new world order. They want to take our freedoms. They want America to fall, because you cannot have a new world order without destroying the greatest nation in the world with the most freedom in the world. And I remind believers and Christians that, hey, your freedom of speech and your freedom of religion are tied to this, and you don't speak up now when you can. There may come a time when you cannot. I know your family, your background. I read about your father was in the Soviet Union during the Nazi holding them out and fled to our country. So you have a background, you understand what's at stake. You've seen the Nazism, you've seen the communism, you've heard about it growing up, at least from your father. And so you know what we're battling here, and we cannot stick our head in the sand. So many people think, well, if I just, if we are nice to them, if we be nice to them, they be nice to us, and it's like, no. This is not about being nice. This is a war. I say the first chapter in Fight Like Heaven. It's like, I wanted to say fight like hell, and I'd say no, fight like heaven. But, I say, well, the war is already on, and you said that starting the program. The war is already on. We are already in a war. It's a psyop. There's a psychological warfare going on. It's for the control of our nation, destruction of America. China's behind it. Some big elite names, globalists are behind it, World Economic Forum. And Donald Trump, General Flynn, and you and others have risen and said, no, we are not going to allow this. We have to tell the truth, and have fought to get this in there. I wish by the work of the hand of God that Donald Trump and General Flynn and you would be in office. We'd eradicate this. We'd drain the ocean, not the swamp, and we'd reclaim our nation.
I would be happy to bring you in to help me to conduct an exorcism of Washington, D.C.
I would be glad to do that. I'll take on the family part of that and get these evil liars, the NEA, what they've done in our schools, and these psychologists that have spun so many crazy lies to make us think that our children could be all these 87 plus spectrums of sexual
as part of the ministry, if you want to call it ministry of retribution, one of the components I think that needs to happen is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. needs to head the Nuremberg 2.0 commission.
Ooh.
And there will be thousands of people that will be facing consequences, from Mike Pence, from his decisions on the COVID task force,
Fauci,
all the way down.
Please.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm saying all the way down through and to include every school. We're going to go ahead and take a look at all the voting that occurred at all 3,143 county and county equivalents nationally of those members of school boards that decided to go ahead and asphyxiate children with face toilets, to mutilate the backs of their ears and their faces, that went ahead and forced the nose rapes, right? Anybody that was involved in the CCP-19 tyranny, down to the school board level, are going to face criminal charges. For example, in Virginia, you're going to see, asphyxiation, child abuse, child endangerment, anybody promulgating and promoting the mutilation, right? You're going to be faced. These are all felony charges. And actually, as a school board member, because your decision has an impact on all the people in that school, we're going to take that charge and multiply it by the number of students that are under your responsibility, and that will be the number of charges that you will face per crime. So in the instance of Fairfax County, we're talking about probably upwards of 100,000 students.
Wow. I have to ask you,
so 100,000 felonies.
Wow. And
we've
all watched this. We know it's true. We cannot just shove it under the rug, all the deaths, all the children, all the lives. I have to ask you why I have you here, because I know we're running short on time, but I just wanted to say, tell me, I hear all the time about pedophilia rings and the tide of the government. Is this true? Who's involved? What? I mean, I know it's another huge, big topic, but I just want to know your opinion.
I got to refer you to the new movie that just came out.
Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
So a lot of people ask me that question, and I have not done the deep dive analysis on that particular topic because I feel as though there are enough people out there that are doing it. So I'd rather refer you to them, and I don't disagree with any of their assertions, whether it's the movie or things that you've heard. I try to focus on areas that no one else is really covering, and I try to do that deep, substantive, deep dive. And then once, at a point when somebody else of bigger name than I do goes into that level of detail, I'm already on to the next topic that no one else is covering. That's kind of my niche that I tried to.
Right, and that's because that's what you did in the military, right? You went in, you did insurgents, right? You did trainings and helping. So you're looking at it from that angle where you went into countries and did different, operations there, and you saw what the enemy. Then you turn around and you saw the enemy doing that to us.
Yeah, basically, in a sense, what I like to do is identify, come up with the question of what is going on, and then figure out the answer to it, and then try to convey that in a way that's palatable to leaders, I guess, throughout our country that are patriots to understand, so that they can go ahead and start to educate the remainder of society that's willing to listen. And yeah, I mean, in a sense, it's train, advise, and equip our
Train, advise, and
fellow
equip.
citizens of what's going on to them, because a lot of them are, a lot of folks are busy. A lot of them are just compliant with, they try to comply their way to through tyranny, which doesn't work. But
No. A lot of people say to me, aren't you getting in trouble or getting a lot of pushback for bringing up these topics and having these conversations? And aren't you getting persecuted? And I'm like, no
no,
more
it's the
than
other way around.
anybody has in history that fought for freedom. We can't be cowards.
See, people ask the question in the wrong frame. It should be, hey, Ivan, aren't they afraid of you?
Right.
Yes, they should be, because the truth is on our side.
Yes.
It shouldn't be like, oh, I'm the small person, the David and the Goliath. No. We're going to crush them. We're going to crush the commies, and we're going to castrate the deep state. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I don't care. While I'm alive, that's what's going to happen.
I love that.
I don't know what's going to be.
That's what I'm looking for.
But I'm just telling you that's what's going to happen.
As a woman, as a mother, I want to hear that.
You know who you are.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I want to hear that. That's awesome, because we want to know we're going to win this battle. We know spiritually we win it, but there's a peace that we have to have. No fear. And if we keep pushing the truth, no matter what it looks like, at some point, the truth wins. And God is on our side, because God is a God of truth and justice. And righteousness,
the truth shall set us free.
Righteousness and justice, the Bible says, are the foundation of his throne. So we have to do what is right, and we have to do what is just. Ivan, thank you so much for sharing. I know a lot of what you said. You are a brainiac. You know what's going on. You're like got all the pieces and parts. And so today, some of the people may be like, wait a minute, I don't know about this. But it stirs us to know.
If people want to kind of do a little review, I have my website. It's raiklin.com.
Say it again.
And I have many interviews that I've done there. Yes, RAIKLIN.
RAIKLIN.
Yes, and I have many interviews that I've done, and it's categorized by topic. I've probably done some of the most deep dive research on January 6th, the federal government's role in it. I have a Substack that I link to with more in-depth research and analysis. A lot of it's the blueprint of what some of these committees are actually implementing and executing in Congress. We happen to provide a copy of some of that to Kevin McCarthy, and then some of the members of Congress and the chairs of these committees. So it's not, is it going as fast as I'd like it to? No. If Trump took on the role as Speaker for 2 weeks and appointed me as the House Sergeant at Arms, I think in about 2 weeks we would have accomplished, maybe 2.5. We would have accomplished everything, and a lot of people would have been burnt out. But that's just kind of how things needed to have occurred. But since he didn't appoint me as Sergeant at Arms, we have to work through the systems that are currently in place.
Because we do believe in law and order.
They just don't. Well, yeah, they don't have, the people that are in place right now just don't have the courage.
Yeah, that courage. That's what we need, courage. Sometimes it takes more courage than even faith. We believe the word of God, but it takes courage to act on it. And we need people that will act and open their eyes and pray and discern. Do you mind closing us in prayer? Would you be willing to do that?
I would rather have you do it.
Okay, I'm glad to do that. All right, I'm glad to do it. Father, we just thank you for the work that Ivan's doing. I pray, God, you continue to expose the works of darkness and that he exposes them so that we can all see it. Your word tells us to do that. It says to have nothing to do with the deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. So I thank you, Father, you give him the grace, the knowledge, and you continue to protect him and his family as he's being persecuted like General Flynn was and Donald Trump has, and anyone that's trying to bring the truth out to these liars. Lord, we ask you to expose those that have done injustice, that have committed treason, that have stolen things, stolen our nation, stolen our election, and are in bed with the CCP. God, expose it in a huge victory. Lord, you know you are our justice, and you know that, and we believe that, God. And so we thank you, Lord. Though it looked like our nation hang on by a thread, there is a remnant, and God, you always are able to work with a remnant and change things. And we ask you to use us today. Help us to do our part, every one of us, and wake up our nation. In Jesus' name, Amen. Bless Ivan, God. Thank you
Amen.
for his
Drenda,
work.
thank you. No, because I was talking most of the time. I wanted to provide
No,
you an
I want
opportunity
to
on
hear.
what
No, I want to hear
your
from you.
specialty.
Well,
So,
I wrote a book about the 7 mountains and how the enemy's invaded all of them. And, everything from the education, the medical. I saw this as I studied this. I wept and cried because I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea.
you know it. And
Yeah.
God bless you. Thank you for
Thank you.
creating this platform and having an audience to be able to essentially use this as a vessel to educate
I've
those
just
folks,
been,
right?
yes,
To get the truth out,
amen.
set us
I've just been
free, and
reading,
then send us.
yes, amen. I've just been reading General Flint's book about fifth generation warfare that someone gave me. I was like, wow, I've always wanted to know. I know Satan is the real tyrant. He's the ultimate tyrant, the enemy behind all the enemies of communism, Marxism, socialism, all those, fascism. But I also wanted to understand from a tactical warfare standpoint how actual, because it's the same, warfare is warfare, right? And so the things that work. And I wanted to do that. So I'm really been excited to read that book. And thank you for what you're doing, exposing those things. If the civilian and the military, the Bible says no man goes to war at his own expense. And so I believe God will provide for you and continue to bless you because you're not going to war at your own expense. You are in war. You're one of our fighters and our leaders, and you're helping to disseminate and help us to understand what's really happening. And we need to know that because we are like sheep sometimes. We just are led to the slaughter. But God has raised up shepherds and people that will bring and speak. No, not anymore. I agree. And as a mother to this nation, I'm willing to fight for the kids, the grandkids in this nation that I love. There's no place like America. We've traveled the world, and I tell people, before you start criticizing this nation or its constitution, go travel somewhere and see what the rest of the world lives like. There's nowhere like America. So thank you for fighting for our nation, Ivan. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. Wow, Ivan had a lot of great things to say. I encourage you to know the truth. We got to dig in. Sometimes it's hard to, you hear things. I know we're all busy with busy lives. We're all trying to most of us are just getting by day to day, paycheck to paycheck, and that's what they want, so that you're not involved in politics, you're not involved in government, you don't know what's going on. That's what we try to do here. I want you to subscribe, like, share this today, this conversation. Go check out some more of Ivan's information. We'll see you next time. And until then, stay on guard.